Hello everyone, so today I want to talk about a spiritual dream that makes me crazy. Now I often have lucid dreams, I often have dreams in which massive things are happening, like huge tidal waves, or being able to jump skyscrapers high, or just this massive collision of planets, or sometimes it's just the experience of fear or happiness or pleasure. It's just very vibrant, and it might have to do with me being schizophrenic, and it might have to do with me being a very spiritual person, to where I can conceive vast landscapes, maybe. I don't know all the factors as to why I have dreams like this, but the dream that I had last night was very spiritual, and I've had it several times. I'm basically on this vast water world, and there's only this stump that I'm sitting on. This stump has the rune Ewas, and it's a stump that I actually got out of somebody's yard, and I have literally in real life, and I wrote the rune with red paint, Ewas, and that's the connection between different dimensions. That's the rune of communication between different dimensions. So I'm sitting on this stump that's basically the only thing that exists besides this vast ocean, kind of like the one you see behind me. And there's this tiny island where it only fits this stump and my feet. Now I'm sitting there, and usually I'm just sitting there and gazing up and just horrified but also inspired. When I look up in this dream, there are two planets that kind of look like Jupiter exploding into each other, to where they're connected like Tetris, but they're like locked in this exploding pattern, and they're just like that, and they're kind of moving, and it's very vast, and it's above me in this dream. And once again, this is kind of a water world type planet. Now, last night it was particularly interesting because Papa Legba, and I'll put up an image of what he kind of looked like in the dream, close enough, and he crawled out of the ocean and kind of was at my feet and looking at me, and he asked me, and then before standing up, "Why do you insist on sitting here? Can I join you?" And then there's a few other details that I'm not going to throw in, but it really felt like Papa Legba was crawling out of the ocean, the spiritual, I guess you could say, subconscious of the universe. He was crawling out and asking me why I basically don't go into the water. And in Vodou, this is very interesting. The Loa are often described as being below the ocean, and basically a spiritual realm that is accessed through this level of consciousness. You can call it the mass subconscious, you can call it universal consciousness. It's not very clear in this dream, but the ocean does represent a spiritual connection to everything that the ocean represents, and the whole world is like this. And he's basically asking me in this dream, why am I sitting on the stump? Why not go into the water? And it's really hard once I get into the water to really see what is up and down. There's this membrane around me, and it's really hard to figure out where I'm at. And even gravity feels very non-corporeal. This could represent my current state in the universal subconscious, or my state in relation to God, not really knowing where God is, but submerging myself into the ocean. Sitting in this material world on this little tiny island with a stump on it, a cut tree stump, you could say, and sitting in between basically the sky and the ocean. Sky being a causal relationship to the universe. Gods can be considered having causal forms that cause a vast range of things. When I'm sitting on this stump, and when I went into the ocean, there was another guy down there already drowning, and he was a very aggressive person, and Papa Legba was trying to help him, trying to ask him, accept my help, I can help you, I can guide you. But he's like, no, I'd rather drown. I would never accept help, even if it's freely given. And he just kept on drowning and just submerged. And his destiny seemed to be madness, seemed to be frustration, and an unwillingness to accept help from even a guide like Papa Legba. So Papa Legba guided me basically once I submerged myself into the water. But this dream is very maddening because it doesn't feel like there's an up and down. It feels like no matter where I am, I'm floating. There's markers like the top of the ocean, through the atmosphere, the planets above, but it feels like I'm turning in every which way. And this could explain how I feel in my spiritual path, that I'm turning multiple ways, and I'm not really sure which way to go. I'm not really sure, where I'm at even. And these two exploding planets exploding into each other above me are incredibly troubling because they're the size of Jupiter, and this water world is like the size of Earth. And I'm just looking up and seeing these planets basically frozen into an explosion with each other. Now, this dream has never before had Papa Legba in it. In this dream, Papa Legba seemed to want to guide me. He seemed to want to beckon me into, the united consciousness of the multiverse. I call this galaxy. I've called it this before when I think back to other times I've had this dream. I call it the galaxy of impossible things. And the whole mechanism, whether it be gravity or planets or imagery or trying to associate where I'm at in it, it always feels like it's topsy-turvy, like it's impossible for these things to exist in the state that they're in, yet there it is before me and I'm experiencing it. Now, I believe this dream to be very spiritual and significant to where I'm at in my spiritual progress and on the path that I'm on, in relation to, not really following a particular spirit or God, but having this my own particular mishmash of spiritual, associations and understandings that really make up how I understand the multiverse. It's incredibly troubling because in the dream I feel far more confused. I feel not connected to my spiritual well-being, my life force, prana. It feels like it's just my isolated ego, and because my ego is isolated and not in contact with my life force, my prana, or my spirit, if you will. This is how I understand it anyway. It is purely driven by its fears and desires and worries. So my ego being isolated as a person separate from the other parts of me, I feel incredibly vulnerable. And this may allude also to how the ego behaves once the soul and spirit move on. And this can be incredibly troubling. And in the dream, I realize that. I realize I have to find some footing in my own personal identity, not necessarily take out anything from my spiritual understanding or take out any spirits or gods within my practice, but really try to figure out where everything is within myself before that time comes to where I have to go into that ocean of consciousness, and I'm submerged in ultimately the ego is dissolved and it becomes part of the grander whole, and its story is submerged and connected to all other stories, as it always really is. But I always wake up afraid and feeling the same way I did in the dream, to where my ego feels isolated and without aid, and fearful of not having an identity in and of itself, but merging back into everything else, and fearful of losing itself. Papa Legba being in the dream, the one of the several times I've had this dream, last night, gives me some hope as to things are trying to guide me. Papa Legba in particular. I've always had a connection with Papa Legba for some reason. Well, I know, because I've tried to, and I believe that my personal vibration is very connected to that gatekeeper. And I always feel on the brink and the edge of the gateways that basically bridge the material world, the material universe, to other universes like the astral universe and the multiple universes around this one. I've always felt very close to that gate, and I've always felt like the key is associating with key masters and guides, so that the gates that already exist within me very vibrantly can be opened up wide, and not going into the ones that lead to darkness and futility and anger and pain and hatred. That is the danger, because I have to avoid those gates while finding the true gates that will lead me to greater unification with the grander whole, the source, spirits, gods, and really combine my consciousness with everything else. And when in these dreams, and a lot of my dreams, the ego feels isolated from consciousness. So it's like this hollow shell just working off of the fears and desires that I have without having the utility of the spirit and the soul and the consciousness that I have when I'm not in the dreams. So, this has just been a spiritual dream that makes me crazy because I always feel insane when I wake up and fearful when I wake up from it, like my ego was isolated. And rarely in dreams do I get to a point where I feel like it's making me insane. But in this one, I always wake up with a certain level of insanity. And it's discomforting because I've been insane before, very insane. And to go back to that brink through a dream is very uncomfortable. And you know, it reminds me that my situation on this planet is very tenuous, just like with other human beings, all other human beings, and to really focus on finding that center of gravity that allows me to move through this world and connect to other worlds without losing myself to the madness of materialism and selfishness and desire and fear. So I hope that this dream that I've shared with you has been interesting. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or you just want to say something, shoot it down in the comment section below. I greatly appreciate it. If you want to support me on Patreon, please do so at www.patreon.com/darkrealist, capital D, capital R. So www.patreon.com/darkrealist, capital D, capital R. And I hope to get more patrons in the future. The growth of my channel on YouTube has not transferred over to Patreon. I have very few followers and people who donate to me, but I really greatly appreciate those of you who do. And if you want to support me and the work that I do, feel free to, give me $1 a month. That's all I really ask for on Patreon, to get access to other content, as well as I share my YouTube videos there and you get emails about it. At any rate, thank you very much for watching. I hope that you read into your dreams and find what they mean for you. And all of you, have a great day.